Okay, let's have a serious conversation about what we saw happen in Congress with the change of the Senate rules and how that affects society as a whole in the mainstream. There's no way to separate the two. They're connected. There's no way to tear them apart. And when we start to move towards a society that kind of approaches things from a gender neutral position, I think a lot of people haven't taken the time to really consider what that means. What does that mean in terms of sports? What does it mean in terms of the military? What does it mean in terms of traditional American values? Things like chivalry. Let's take a look at that. I'm going to play you a clip, and this is kind of what sparked this in my mind, um, of two young people who are participating in female sports, and they were born as males. And listen to what is said here, because I really would love to get some feedback on that. Let's take a look at that.
The Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic Conference, the CIAC, says that athletes can choose to compete for the sport in which they gender identify with. But some are saying this creates an unfair advantage, especially when it comes to athletics.
I had like these pink and purple furry boots that I wear.
Andrea Yearwood says even as a child, she identified as a girl.
Learn to deal with it and grow tougher skin.
Yearwood is a sophomore at Cromwell High School. Born a boy, she's now transitioning and runs track and field on the girls' team. She and Bulkley High School sophomore Terry Miller swept the competition at the girls' track and field state championships last week. Miller is also transgender. Some parents and athletes say the first and second place finishers have an unfair advantage, and they want a level playing field. The Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic Committee says their policy is that student athletes can compete for the gender-specific sport they identify with. That's directly in alignment with state law. But two petitions are now circulating, one in Plainville, the other in Glastonbury, to change that rule.
You have certain people that believe that, men are stronger and faster, and so I can understand that if an athlete is born male, and then competing as female with what they identify with, that some females will feel a particular type of way about it.
Some say reversing the rule would be gender discrimination.
Identify herself as a girl, then I think she should be able to run in a race because she can use the ladies' room, she can wear skirts. Why not run and play sports and stay active?
The cream rises to the top.
No matter if you're a boy or girl.
Correct. There are plenty of athletes now that can tell you, if you were to put the UConn women on the court with the UConn men actually might lose.
The CIAC saying they are listening and empathize, but this is an extremely complex legal issue with multiple layers. Yearwood, grateful for the opportunity to be exactly who she says she's always been.
Extremely grateful because I've heard of stories where some people, don't get the same opportunity as me and have had to go through really hard times.
The CIAC says this policy has been in place for about a decade. They say so far, no signatures or petitions have come to their desks. Live in News 8 Control, Amy Hudak, News 8.
Okay, in that video, they talked about these two young people going through the change. These young men going through a change to make them female. They always identified as female. I gather they're taking hormone therapy, hormone replacement. But let's look at that in and of itself. I remember a time where drugs, hormones, steroids, all of that was completely off the table when it came to sports. Athletes had to be clean. And now we seem to have forgotten about that entirely. The reason I bring this up is because it's important for us to note that males and females are just biologically different. So when you look at that in terms of sports, it's not about what you identify as. It's more or less about a completely even playing field based on genetics and biology. You already have some people who have a distinct advantage because of their genetics, the way that they're born. And you really can't say much about that. That's just the way it goes. That's the game. That's how it's always been. Some people are just better designed for certain things. But when you look at the introduction of unfair competition based on the way a person identifies. It becomes completely unfair. And you know who usually wins or loses in that situation? The ones who are men win, and the ones who are born female lose. And it's unfair. The women tend to lose out more than the men in these situations. I can't think of any example of someone who was born female changing into a male and dominating in sports. I've never seen that happen. If you can think of an example, let me know, because I've never seen it before. I think that'd be interesting to take a look at. But we see examples all over the place of individuals who were born male, identifying as females, and dominating, just completely dominating on the athletic field. I don't think that's fair. I also remember not long ago where there was a big thing about locker rooms. There was a big to-do about women being allowed to go into the men's locker room. And they felt as if if women weren't allowed into the men's locker room, that they were being discriminated against. But you never heard anybody talking about men going into the women's locker room. If it's gender neutral, shouldn't that be a thing? Shouldn't that be fair? It's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. Shouldn't there be men going into female locker rooms? Or shouldn't there have been a case or an argument for that? If you're going to move that way, then you got to move that way across the board. But in sports, let's take a look. Let's bring this into perspective. All right, take a look at the peak in sports. Take a look at take boxing, for instance. Right. Let's take a look at a specimen in boxing. Take a look at this. That's Mike Tyson working out. Do you think it's fair, reasonable, anything close to a good idea to put a woman in the ring with that? Does that make any sense at all? I think in a lot of cases, it's akin to murder to put a man in the ring, the wrong man in the ring with that. If you're going to put a man in the ring with that, he better be on top of his game. But I haven't seen any females, any women who were on top of their game that would last longer than 15 seconds in the ring with that. So on that note, let's move on to the military. The military is not the same as it used to be. Now we're living in a high-tech age. We have a lot of advanced weapon systems, a lot of highly capable female soldiers, a lot of them. With the weapon systems that we have in place now, there's so many things that women can do on the battlefield, just as well as men. But on that note, when is the last time you've seen special operations soldiers? When have you looked on television and seen a Navy SEAL team, Army Rangers, Green Berets, Army Special Forces, Marine Force Recon? When have you seen women operate in that capacity? You know, the unit, I was in the 82nd Airborne Division. We were a very high-speed, low-drag unit. But in order to be a member of that unit, the infantry units, you had to meet certain standards. You had to be able to pass a physical fitness test on a certain level. You had to be able to road march at a certain pace. You had to be able to carry a certain amount of weight. There were standards in place. Those standards weren't lowered for anyone. You either met the standard or you weren't there. You never made it there. Now, I would argue this. If someone wanted to put females in these elite infantry units, I would say that, and this could offend some people, but I would say, provided they meet the standard, go for it. But the standard shouldn't be lowered. The standard's there for a reason. If a female could meet all of the physical standards, the same standards that the men are meeting, then so be it. But you don't change the standard. I said that to say that it's just like the difference between equality and equity. Equality of opportunity and equality of outcomes. If you want to make it even across the board, across all genders, then allow anybody to apply. But there are a certain set of standards that have to be met, and if you don't meet them, you don't qualify. So you have equal opportunity, and if you can meet them standards, you get the same outcome. I don't see a problem with that. But what's happening here is there's a confusion that's just, it's just running amok. And what's happening is they are trying to make everything equal, like an equality of outcomes type of thing, without really giving any thought to why differences exist in the first place. Men and women are not the same. But moving forward to the real question, if certain groups of people were so determined to make things equal, make things the same, why haven't I heard any conversations about women being required to sign up for selective service? Why has that conversation not been had? Why doesn't everyone have to sign up for selective service? Why doesn't everyone have to be susceptible for a draft when it comes to the military? Now, I asked that question, but I'm going to throw this in here because I think this is important too. It just may happen. The world that we live in now, you have a lot of people who say the population is already too big or it's growing too fast. One of the main differences between males and females is that in a 9-month period, a man can have countless numbers of children. Women can't. They have one, or it's maybe twins, or maybe some triplets, right? But that's an important difference. It matters when you think about things in a smaller sense, a village, a community, a small country. It matters then, but when you move towards one world government, a globalized type of society, and it's led by people who already believe there's too many people, then you'll see that happen. You will see this blurring or this removal of the differences between the two, because they won't care if it's just as many women get slaughtered as men. As a matter of fact, they might like that. But moving on to the last part, I'm going to go ahead and end this soon. Is chivalry dead? Is chivalry dead? And the reason I ask that question is because I've heard that countless times. Chivalry is dead. But the weird thing for me is the way things are now. I believe, again, men and women are different. I believe in opening doors, holding doors open. What's funny about that, though, is that when I look at myself and I look at my approach to that, if I'm entering a building and a man comes up behind me, I hold the door open for them too. Chivalry is not specific to men and women, although we often think of it that way. But I do think there's got to be some type of difference, the way we approach that. But what I find is that often I'm uncomfortable. I don't know if it's going to be seen as an offense, or if somebody might have a problem with me treating them differently because they're female. My take on that is I do it anyway. And I think it's a generational thing. It's just something that's just part of my nature. That's something that I'm going to continue doing. I will hold doors open for women. If I see a woman who needs help lifting something, then I will help her lift something. That's just the way I'm cut out. And like I said, it may be a generational thing. Maybe that's dying. Maybe Maybe it's going to go away. Maybe there's no need for it anymore. I don't know. What's your take on that? Let me know in the comment section. But I thought I'd throw that out there. What does this say about where this country is going, where this world is going? What's it going to look like in 20, 30 years? And is it going to be all good or is it going to be all bad? Let me know in the comments, guys. Take care. Peace.